So we took a little break last week and we are right back on track on chapters 4 and 5 of Genesis. We will be covering, I am most certain, both chapters in its entirety because chapter 5 is about genealogy and it just ties in perfectly with chapter 4 and the message, the entire picture that I want you guys to be able to see together. I thought it made sense for us to just study it together. I will read it entirely. However, chapter 5, I'm not going to break it down verse by verse like I'm going to do with 4, just because, like I said, it's just confirming the genealogy. And if you guys want connecting precepts at the end, I'll be more than glad to share that. But I won't be doing it during the study because it makes no sense to prolong the study just to show you where else in scriptures it confirms, for example, that Messiah came from the line of Seth, etc., etc. So, but we will touch upon chapter 5 just to connect to the point that we're trying as a whole to see from chapter 4. And I hope that makes sense. So having said that, we will begin reading chapter 4. And you know what? I decided I'm going to just read it myself, just because like I said, we're doing 2 chapters and just to, I guess, take advantage of, the time. And because we're doing it solely via Zoom tonight, I figured why not? Let me just read it. So chapter 4 of Genesis. Now Adam knew Eve, his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain, and said, I have acquired a man from the Adon. Then she bore this time his brother Abel. Now Abel was a keeper of sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. I'm going to stop right there really quick because just to recap, I know it's been 2 weeks that we didn't connect, but just to recap, we spoke a little bit about this, how Abel from the beginning had his assignment to be of the righteous seed. And you see the distinction here between him being a keeper of sheep, which is basically what Messiah is, and Cain being a tiller of the ground. And we know the connection with tilling the ground has to do with the curse that came from the fall of man, the curse that came from disobedience to the command. And so we see right off the bat the distinction between the 2 brothers. So I just wanted to point that out before I continue reading. So verse 3. And in the process of time, it came to pass that Cain brought an offering of the fruit of the ground to the Adon. Abel also brought of the firstborn of his flock and of their fat. And the Adon respected Abel and his offering. But he did not respect Cain and his offering, and Cain was very angry, and his countenance fell. So the Adon said to Cain, Why are you angry, and why has your countenance fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin lies at the door, and its desire is for you, but you should rule over it. Now Cain talked with Abel his brother, and it came to pass, when they were in the field, that Cain rose up again against Abel his brother, and killed him. Then the Adon said to Cain, Where is Abel your brother? He said, I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper? And he said, What have you done? The voice of your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. So now you are cursed from the earth, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you till the ground, it shall no longer yield its strength to you. A fugitive and a vagabond, you shall be on the earth. And Cain said to the Adon, My punishment is greater than I can bear. I'm going to scroll down here. Verse 14. Surely you have driven me out this day from the face of the ground. I shall be hidden from your face. I shall be a fugitive and a vagabond on the earth. And it will happen that anyone who finds me will kill me. And the Adon said to him, Therefore, whoever kills Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. And the Adon set a mark on Cain, lest anyone finding him should kill him. And now I'm going to enter a little bit into genealogy, but I am going to take a break between chapter 4 and 5 when I read the entirety of chapter 4. So now verse 16. Then Cain went out from the presence of the Adon and dwelt in the land of Nod, on the east of Eden. And Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Enoch. And he built a city and called the name of the city after the name of his son Enoch. To Enoch was born Irad, and Irad begot Mehujael, and Mehujael begot Methushael, and Methushael begot Lamech. Then Lamech took for himself two wives. The name of one was Ada, and the name of the second was Zillah. And Ada bore Jabal. He was the father of those who dwelt in tents and have livestock. His brother's name was Jubal. He was the father of all those who play the harp and flute. Jabal and Jubal, that's the difference, okay. And as for Zillah, she also bore Tubal Cain, an instructor of every craftsman in bronze and iron. And the sister of Tubal Cain was Naamah. Then Lamech said to his wives, Ada and Zillah, hear my voice. Wives of Lamech, listen to my speech, for I have killed a man for wounding me, even a young man for hurting me. If Cain shall be avenged sevenfold, then Lamech 77-fold. So here I'm gonna include a little bit of Jasher later, because when you read from Genesis, from the account on Genesis, you see that it goes from basically the genealogy of Cain, of the family of Cain, to straight up talking about Lamech and his wives and what had taken place. And there's like kind of like one of those how do you say it, like when you're watching a movie and it skips, there's a name for that, but like a cliffhanger, right? Like it jumps from one topic to another and it gives you no context. So we are going to fill in from Jasher, because Jasher does provide a little bit more context and a little bit more details as to how this took place. So now last two verses of chapter 4. And Adam knew his wife again, and she bore a son and named him Seth. For the Most High has appointed another seed for me instead of Abel, whom Cain killed. And as for Seth, to him also a son was born, and he named him Enoch. Then the men began to call on the name of the Adon. All right. So having read chapter 4, we're now going to start breaking down what this chapter is all about. And hopefully you guys haven't forgotten what chapters 1 through 3 were about. So in case you forgot, let's just go and recap. So chapters 4 through 5 of Genesis, I know we haven't read 5 yet, but like I said, it's just purely genealogy, is not merely a family narrative. It is the revelation of two seeds, two genealogies, and two spiritual trajectories that run throughout Scripture. So who are the two seeds? It began with Cain and Abel, right? And obviously we know that those two seeds carried forth more fruit, meaning more babies, right? And that's what we're going to focus on, because the entire point of Scriptures is understanding who comes from who and what is the difference, because there is a marked difference. We're even going to see later Messiah referencing the seed of Cain as the seed of the serpent, or the seed of Satan himself. So it confirms the fact that it is important to, from the beginning, understand the distinction between these two seeds. I know I spoke a lot about this last time, but again, understanding this is going to not only allow you to understand Scriptures better, but allow you to even understand what was the point of all the wars that we see in the Old Testament. What was the point of him having, for example, David kill the giant Goliath and then become a man of war and kill all, including children, when he would go to pagan cities, pagan nations. And we're going to understand that from a different lens that perhaps you didn't understand before. I don't know about you guys, but when I was younger and I would hear about the stories about the Old Testament, I would always question it. I would always be about and I would say it like this. I would say, why was God so mean? And why was he like so harsh in the Old Testament as opposed to like Messiah in the New, right? Not understanding first and foremost that it was the same God. It was the same Elohim, right? From beginning to end, but also not understanding that the reason for this was because he was trying to keep his holy seed from getting tainted and corrupt, not only spiritually, it goes way deeper, but physically. There's a reason why you're going to see through the books in the Torah, through Genesis, through Deuteronomy, and even continuing forth, you're going to see how important it was when he gave the laws in written form to his people that the men should not mix with women from other nations, and vice versa. But especially the men who are the seed bearers, because the whole point of it was that the seed needed to be preserved and kept intact. In other words, there is a distinction between the seed of Cain and the seed of Abel. I don't know if you guys are following me. Like the word says, he who has ears to hear, let him hear. Messiah would always speak like this throughout scriptures. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. I actually gave a teaching on Sunday for the congregation that we attend, and I was sharing with them how that word hear in Hebrew is Shema, which means to not only listen, but to listen and obey. In other words, if you're just connecting with us tonight to just listen but not to obey, then guess what? His word is not gonna transform you. You're going to hear, but you're not gonna really hear. I don't know if you're understanding me. However, if you come with a prostrated heart, a spirit who is willing to learn his truth, a spirit who is willing to reject even knowledge, pre-existing knowledge that has been taught to us throughout generations, and say, Abba, at the end of the day, I don't want to know knowledge. I just want your truth, and I want your truth to bear fruit in me. Then in that case, you will Shema, you will hear, and you will lend your ear in obedience and also hear and understand what the word is speaking. But until you're ready to do that, you won't get it. It's going to fly by you and you're going to be like, what is she talking about, right? But once again, I know you guys are ready to receive his truth. And I know this word will bear much fruit in your hearts, because the point of understanding the distinction between Cain and Abel goes much deeper than just adding knowledge in our vocabulary and in our minds, right? So once again, not everyone desires the truth. Many prefer comfort, but truth always confronts. And the whole point of the matter is that it is important for our reality, or what we thought was our truth, to be confronted. Why? Because if not, you're going to stay in deception and you're going to believe the lie that the world is trying to project to you. Yes, Alina, facts. She said the truth ain't popular. It really isn't. It's not. So, having said that, let's continue. So we have the first part, and once again, I'm going to break it down. I'm going to try my best to break it down verse by verse, going back and forth with the account on Genesis 4, right? But I have it right here, and I'm going to include some Spanish in here for those that don't speak Spanish or perhaps are connecting later and don't understand Spanish. I apologize ahead of time, but I had to incorporate some Spanish because it makes so much more sense in Spanish, and I don't know how exactly to translate it directly from the translation to Spanish to English, and I'm going to show you why. So for example, in the verse 1, where it says, and Adam knew Eve, his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain, and said, I have acquired a man from the Adán. In the Spanish, it literally says, well, I'm going to read it in Spanish and I'm going to explain it to you. It says, conoció Adán a su mujer Eva, la cual concibió y dio a luz a Caín. So in other words, in English, it just says that she conceived and bore Cain. But in Spanish, it adds more of basically, he came from her only, meaning la cual. And I'm going to break it down even further in the next slide. La cual, meaning la cual, not los cuales. Like if it would have been Adam and Eve conceiving Cain, it would have said in Spanish, los cuales concibieron. And then it would say that Eve gave birth to Cain, right? But I want to break it down like this so that you see the distinction. And the observation is this, that Eve does not simply announce a birth, she makes a theological declaration. At the end here, she says, I have acquired a man from the Adán. And that phrase, I have acquired a man, It is Kaniti-ish. I don't know how to pronounce that. Pronounce my, for lack of better pronunciation. But in other words, what this means is intentional language. It implies fulfillment, expectation, and even triumph. And we're going to see more in the Targum's translation that it adds and confirms this understanding. So she is celebrating, in other words, the fact that the Most High allows her to keep this man from the Adon, meaning not from the line of the Adon, but from the Alahim, meaning he is a mighty one, and she was able to keep him and was not punished for it. We see that the curse immediately after eating the fruit, once again, if you weren't for the first 3 chapters, the fruit is a metaphor, it's not a literal fruit. And so we see that when she takes on the fruit, right? She partakes on the fruit, and then immediately, they do this act. The Most High then curses Adam with the tilling of the ground, but then curses Eve and the serpent differently. He curses the serpent, that the serpent would eat dust all the days of his life, right? And crawl on his belly, etc., and that there would be an enmity between him and the woman. And then the curse for the woman is basically, meaning for Eve, is basically that she would have pain in her childbearing, right? She will deliver her children with pain. And why does he curse her with that immediately after partaking of the forbidden fruit? Because you could clearly see that she conceived immediately after the act. So she conceives, and because of the curse, she now, after she actually gives birth to Cain, she says basically, thank you for allowing me to keep this son, right? That's basically, in a nutshell, what I have acquired a man from the Adon. It's kind of like, in a nutshell, implying. And by the way, I like the graphic I added here. I found it on Pinterest. Let me go back, because look at it, at this beautiful image of some type of intimacy taking place kind of like within a tree. Remember how we've always been talking about it wasn't a literal tree? Well, that kind of like, kind of shows you more or less what took place there. And so, all right. So now let's go to the part with Abel, right? So verse 2 immediately says, afterwards she bore his brother Abel. So here we see, and this is from the Targum's translation, which again, I'm going to bring it in later. It leads to understand that they were twins in the womb. One seed from one person, right? Meaning Adam, and the other seed from the serpent. And so Abel clearly being the righteous seed, you see that in verse 2, as a matter of fact, let's go back and read it. There's no declaration. It just says, then she bore again, this time his brother Abel. Now Abel was a keeper of sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. But notice how with Abel, she doesn't do the same declaration that she does with Cain. So that's what I want to point out immediately there. You see that, guys? With Cain, it's almost like, wow, thank you for letting me keep him. With Abel, she was just like, oh, okay, cool. Abel came. Nothing was said, right? And so clearly we see that there is no declaration, no expressed gratitude, and no theological statement. So Abel appears quietly, right? Almost in the background, almost like his brother is born, a few minutes or a couple hours later, here comes Abel, right? So why, the question is then, why does Eve celebrate Cain but not Abel, right? So if multiplication was already ordained, and we know that because we can find that in Genesis 1:28, then why wasn't the birth of Abel also emphasized as she emphasized the one in Cain? And those are just questions that whoever hasn't connected with us before, you should begin to question yourself, right? And be like, that is true. That is quite interesting, right? So now we're going to bring in the Targum expansion. And I have it here, but I'll read it also from the online. Actually, let's read it there first before we look into our graphics. Let me just move this out of the way. So we have chapter 4 in the Targum's translation, and it reads as following. And Adam knew Hava is Eve, his wife, who had desired the angel. Remember what we spoke about the serpent being an angel? Lucifer being an angel. Look how the Targums add so much more clarity. It literally says Adam knew Eve, his wife, meaning who had desired the angel, meaning Eve had desired the angel. Remember how in Genesis 3, it literally says that the fruit was desirable to her, right? Well, here is very specific. Who was the fruit, right? And then it says she desired the angel and she conceived. You see that? So there's a conception that took place between the angel, which we know is Lucifer, and Eve. And then it says, and bore Cain. And she said, I have acquired a man. Here it adds more understanding. It says the angel of the Adon. In other words, Cain was a Nephilim. Cain was half angel, half human, to call it that, right? Basically a Nephilim, which is why she thanks the Most High, basically, that she was allowed to keep him. Now it says, and she added to bear from her husband Adam his twin. You see that? In the Targums confirms what I've been telling you guys about this birth being a twin birth. So his twin is of the seed of Adam. Even Abel, meaning that his name is Abel. That's what that means. And Abel was a shepherd of the flock, but Cain was a man working in the earth. So I'm going to keep it there. I'm going to go back to the slides. So you guys can see how clear it is in the Targums translation, in the expansion there. So literally points out that she conceived and bore Cain from this desired angel, from this desired forbidden fruit. This act led to a conception. And although in the regular canon text doesn't say it, we see in other texts that it implies a twin pregnancy. And you might say, but how was it possible to have twins from two different fathers? It is not that common, but to be honest, you can search it and you will find that it has happened. Yes, within our world, in our lifetime, even in our generations, there's been cases of women who have slept, I know, trashy women, obviously, who have slept with one person and while they're still ovulating, slept with another person and create two different babies from two different seeds, right? And we know that fraternal twins could be the case because fraternal twins are in two separate sacs, meaning that the egg that when she was ovulating, basically more than one egg descended and found sperm to meet it. And so, yes, that is quite possible to have seed from two different people. We know it's not that common, but then again, think about it this way. Eve was still in Eden. Look, talk about, she was the most fertile woman to ever exist. She had not been tainted with anything corrupt up to that point. So any act would lead in conception. Just think about it, because I know it's not that easy to get pregnant nowadays, let alone to have twins. But in those days, my mentality is like, not in those days, like literally in Eden, man, she just had come out of creation, like she was pure and super fertile. Yes, Jessica's sharing that she looked that up a couple of months ago, and that is indeed possible. It is rare for it to happen, but definitely possible. And yes, like I said, it's probably more rare for us in our time because it's not as easy now to conceive because of everything that we've been poisoned with and all these things that even now, normally, it's even hard to conceive a normal baby. It's not as easy, right? So, but anyhow, let's continue. So going to the next slide. Okay, so this ancient interpretive translation highlights a tension already present in the Hebrew text, like I just read. There are 3 births and 2 sexual acts. And I say 3 births, that's including later Seth's birth, right? But only 2 sexual acts, which it's ultimately the fact of the matter is that something does not align with the interpretation that has been given or being handed down, because basically they've been saying she bore Cain first from Adam, and then she had Abel from Adam, and later on she has Seth. But we know that, including the Targums expansion, we know that there were only 2 acts and 3 births. And so I didn't put it here, but you guys, have you ever seen a picture of yin and yang? It literally looks like two sperms, like in a womb type of thing within a womb. And the yin and yang basically puts like one in black and one in white. And within the black, there's a white dot, and within the white, there is a black dot. And basically, what I can see from that is that that's a representation of literally what was in Eve's womb at the time, because she had something pure, a corrupt with corrupt seed mixed in it, and then she had the corrupt seed but still had something good in it because of the fact that it was from the Eve's womb. So I don't know. I don't think it's by coincidence. I might be far-fetched once again, but it just makes sense to me. But anyhow, sorry, I meant to go back here. Um, so now you might be asking, like, but everywhere it shows that Adam was Cain's father, right? And I'm gonna break it down with scriptures to show you guys why I believe Cain was just as much of father to Cain as Joseph was a father to Messiah. What does that mean? That he was more like an adoptive type father role. So again, scripture never explicitly states that Adam begat Cain. It does not. And we're going to see how Cain later on is not even counted in Adam's genealogy. And I don't think it's for a reason. That's why genealogy is important, for you guys to stop and to see scripture and precept upon precept so you can see. So Cain is conspicuously absent from Adam's genealogy in Genesis 5. We'll see it together. Messiah later identifies Cain as being of the evil one, and we'll read it together in 1 John 3:12 a little later. So if Cain were biologically Adam's seed, Adam would have to be the evil one, which is impossible. Adam relates to Cain in the same way Joseph, like I said, relates to Messiah. Legal fatherhood without seed origin. Because it is possible for you to have legal fatherhood. It's basically like when you adopt a child. So it's the same exact thing. Messiah, I'm pretty sure, called Joseph his dad, but we know that he did not come from Joseph's seed. And this is the thing I was talking about Spanish before, why I read the verse 1 in Spanish to give you the interpretation of what this is. So in Matthew 1:16 it says, and this is in terms of Messiah's genealogy with Mary and Joseph. It says, and Jacob begat Joseph, the husband of Mary, of whom was born Yasha, our Messiah, right? So here you see clearly that Messiah was born of Mary, but he was not Joseph's seed. In Spanish, that reads the same exact way as I read it in Spanish. It says la cual, right? Instead of los cuales. So in other words, el cual would be Joseph, if it would have said that in Spanish, right? La cual would be Mary, which it says that for Eve in Genesis 4, right? And then los cuales would be for both, right? So here in Spanish, it literally says la cual, meaning of whom was born Yasha, meaning that he was born of Mary only, not of Joseph's seed. And I give this example to point to the fact that though Eve was Cain's biological mother, Adam was not. That's what I'm trying to point out here. So Joseph is the legal father, not the biological seed of Messiah, right? In the same way, Adam is legal father to Cain, but not his seed source. Let's continue. And now we see Eve's second statement. What was Eve's second statement? It says here, and Adam knew his wife again, and she bore a son and named him Seth. This is after Abel dies, right? It says Adam knew his wife again, and she bore a son and named him Seth. For the Most High has appointed me another seed instead of Abel, whom Cain slew. I don't know if you guys are seeing it and understanding it better now. She thinks, first of all, let's backtrack a little bit. She thanks the Most High for allowing her to keep Cain, right? Who happens to be half basically God and half man, from God meaning from a fallen angel, right? Then Cain slews his brother Abel. She then has intercourse again with her husband Adam, and now conceives Seth from Adam. Now it says that the Most High has appointed me another seed instead of Abel. Notice that it is very specific because the seed of Cain was not of Adam's. And I think that is a statement that Eve is trying to make here. To me, Eve speaks clearly. Seed does indeed matter. Abel's line was cut off. Seth is a replacement seed. Why was Abel's line cut off when Abel dies? Because Cain was not his physical, biological seed. Are you guys understanding? If you guys have questions or not sure, please let me know before I continue. So the tone has shifted from celebration to restoration, meaning celebration the first time that she bears Cain, to the second time now with Seth. It's a restoration of seed. Let me just make sure there's nothing in the chat because I can't see the chat. Okay. Yes, Yasmin is saying, hi, Yazzie. Yasmin is saying, the idea, stepdad began from the garden. Yes? Or, yeah, stepdad or adoptive father, right? Absolutely. All right, so now going to the genealogy. I'm going to take a break here because this is going into Genesis 5, and I do want to read Genesis 5 in its entirety before we begin to break this down, but basically it's to point how Cain is absent there. But before I go there, I want to go back to Genesis, and I want to break down a few Bible verses with you guys. And then we'll continue with 5. So for verse 2, where it says, then she bore again, this time his brother Abel. Now Abel was a keeper of sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. I want to read Luke 11:49 through 50. Therefore the wisdom of the Most High also said, I will send them prophets and apostles, and some of them they will kill and persecute, that the blood of all the prophets which was shed from the foundation of the world may be required of this generation. Now, why am I including this Bible verse here? You might be like, what is she saying? Okay. Obviously, Abel was not a prophet, and in Luke, this is Messiah speaking, right? And he was not a prophet. However, this connects because of the fact that we see that Abel was a righteous seed, and he was indeed a keeper of sheep, which was of the ministry of Messiah, right? And so what Messiah there is saying is, I will send them prophets and apostles, and some of them they will kill and persecute. That is basically what has been taking place from the Garden of, outside the Garden of Eden from the beginning, right? And I say outside the garden because by the time Abel and Cain were born, obviously they were already bound from Eden. But it's been happening from the beginning. The righteous seed was persecuted and indeed was killed. And look what it says on verse 50, that the blood of all the prophets which was shed from the foundation of the world may be required of this generation. And so the foundation of the world was the very beginning. So that just confirms that. And that's what I wanted to incorporate. That's why I wanted to incorporate that verse here. So verse 3, where it says, and in the process of time it came to pass that Cain brought an offering of the fruit of the ground of the Adon. And we have, connecting with this, Numbers 18:12, where it says, all the best of the oil, all the best of the new wine and the grain, their first fruit, which they offered to the Adon, I have given them to you. And obviously this is later on when the Israelites are in the wilderness and the Most High is now guiding them into their promised land. He's basically telling them that he will give them, meaning the Most High is giving it to the people, right? The best of the new wine and the grain and the first fruit. But we see here that Cain brought exactly an offering of the fruit of the ground, but notice how it wasn't of the first fruit. So that is important, and the word of play matters because what's important to the Most High, he fulfills it even towards his people. So that's why here he says their first fruits. It is very important to understand that distinction. Cain just brought random fruit from the ground. You see that? So we have on verse 4 where it says, "Oh, Abel also brought of the firstborn." So we see the distinction with Abel. He didn't only bring from the flock, he took from the firstborn of his flock and of their fat. And the Adon respected Abel and his offering. So that was the distinction. That was the reason why the Most High was content with Abel's offering and not of Cain's. Cain did not bring the best of his fruit. Abel did. We find in scriptures, Numbers 18:17, "But the firstborn of a cow, the firstborn of a sheep, or the firstborn of a goat, you shall not redeem. They are holy. You shall sprinkle their blood on the altar and burn their fat as an offering made by fire for a sweet aroma to the Adon." So we see the importance to the Most High from the beginning of the firstborns, even of the sheep and the cattle, right? Leviticus 3:16. "And the priest shall burn them on the altar as food, an offering made by fire for a sweet aroma. All the fat is the Adon's." So he rejoices in this, in the first fruit, and the first fruit, in the firstborn of all animals. There is a deep meaning, and I was actually reading this with my children earlier when we were having our holy convocation, because we were reading in Deuteronomy about the law of the firstborn, and I was explaining to them why is it so important to the Most High? Everything to do with the firstborn is a shadow of who Messiah is. Literally, Messiah is the firstborn of his creation. And so everything goes back to the firstborn. That's why, think about it this way. That's why Messiah, the Adon, enjoys the sweet aroma of firstborn sacrifices, because it's literally what he would do for us. He made himself sacrifice to us, him being the firstborn. Right? And he was slain as a ransom for all of us. And we see in the New Testament, speaking of this offering made by Abel, Hebrews 11, verse 4, "By faith Abel offered to the Most High a more excellent sacrifice than Cain, through which he obtained witness that he was righteous, God testifying of his gifts, and through it, he being dead still speaks." So in other words, we see that the fact that Abel offered from the firstborn of the cattle was a witness on the account of his righteousness, testifying that he was indeed righteous. You see the connection here. It's beautiful. We also have for verse 8, I'm going to go back here where it says, "Now Cain talked with Abel his brother, and it came to pass when they were in the field that Cain rose up against Abel his brother and killed him." And we know he murdered him, right? Meaning murder, which is killing for no absolute reason, right? Whatsoever, other than jealousy. So connecting with verse 8, we have Matthew 23:35, where it says, "That on you may come all the righteous blood shed on the earth, from the blood of righteous Abel to the blood of Zechariah, son of Berechiah, whom you murdered between the temple and the altar." So in other words, that's confirming that the blood shed, even from Abel unto now, even our days, whoever has murdered unjustly, killed on, which is murder, the blood of that righteous person still cries out, right? Luke 11:51, confirming it one more time, "From the blood of Abel to the blood of Zechariah, who perished between the altar and the temple, yes, I say to you, it shall be required of this generation." 1 John 3:12. This is the one that I had mentioned in the Canva slides. This is speaking of Cain now. "Not as Cain," check this out, "who was of the wicked one and murdered his brother. And why did he murder him? Because his works were evil and his brothers righteous. Do not marvel, my brethren, if the world hates you. We know that we have passed from death to life because we love the brethren. He who does not love his brother abides in death. Whoever hates his brother is a murderer. And you know that no murderer has eternal life abiding in him." So not only is Cain spiritually of the evil one, but he is also physically of the evil one. And John makes it very clear to distinguish him as such. Cain, who is of the wicked one, and also murdered his brother. It's two different statements. It's not that he is wicked because he murdered his brother. It's actually that he is wicked because he is of the wicked one, and he's also wicked because he murdered his brother. I don't know if you guys see the distinction here. It's two separate sentences. We also see in Jude 1:11, woe to them, for they have gone in the way of Cain, have run greedily in the error of Balaam for profit, and perished in the rebellion of Korah. And this is speaking, if you've ever read the book of Jude, I know once Jessica did a beautiful study on it, is basically speaking, comparing the people with the strange flesh, meaning with the fallen angels and the gods of the world who rule the world, right? And then he is basically saying, woe to them, for they have gone in the way of Cain, which is, we already know Cain is a Nephilim, which is why he's included in that chapter of Jude. We also have John. Let me see. Actually, that John connects with verse 9. Verse 9 where it says, then the Adon said to Cain, where is Abel your brother? He said, I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper? So we see him lying from the beginning. He's just like his father, the devil, right? John 8:44, you are of your father, the devil. This is Messiah confronting the Pharisees of his days, right? You are of your father, the devil, and the desires of your father you want to do. It's exactly what Cain did because his father was the devil, right? He was a murderer from the beginning and does not stand in the truth because there is no truth in him. When he speaks a lie, just like Cain, right? He speaks from his own resources, for he is a liar and the father of it. So like father, like son. We see it right here. Oh, I don't know. Why am I supposed to know? Knowing. And here's the thing though. Do you really think, come on, Cain, do you really not know that the Most High knows it all? It's absurd to me. But that just proves how he is just as dumb as his father. So verse 10 where it says, and he said, what have you done? The voice of your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. And I'm going to connect this to a few precepts throughout scriptures where we see the blood, the earth crying, the blood crying out from the earth, different accounts. And we're going to begin with the book of Enoch. The first one is Enoch chapter 9, verse 2, where it says, the earth deprived of her children has cried even to the gate of heaven. We also see Enoch chapter 7. Down here. Enoch chapter 7, verses 2 to 6. It says, and when the angels, the sons of heaven, beheld them, they became enamored of them, saying to each other, come, let us select for ourselves wives from the progeny of men, and let us beget children. Then their leader, Samyaza, said to them, I fear that you may perhaps be indisposed to the performance of this enterprise, and that I alone shall suffer for a grievous crime. But they answered him and said, we all swear and bind ourselves by mutual execrations that we will not change our intention, but execute our projected undertaking. In other words, this account here is speaking about when the angels started doing exactly what took place in Eden, the rest of the fallen angels. And we're going to read more of that when we get to Genesis 6, because that's literally what took place. And they all swore to one another that if one did the crime, basically, they would all execute it together. And that is connecting once again with verse 10. Actually, that wasn't supposed to be with verse 10. Okay, just leave it there and I'll remember exactly where that one goes. But let's continue with James chapter, connecting with that one, same verse 10. James 5, verse 4. Indeed, the wages of the laborers who mowed your fields, which you kept back by fraud, cry out, meaning the land, right? The fields cry out. And the cries of the reapers have reached the ears of the Adon of Sabaoth. We also find the same depiction of words in Numbers 35:33. So you shall not pollute the land where you are, for blood defiles the land, and no atonement can be made for the land for the blood that is shed on it, except the blood of him who shed it. So we clearly see always a connection with, don't worship on the land where there is blood that's been shed there. Remember, the life is in the blood. And we come from the ground. So every time the blood goes back in the ground, there is a very interesting connection there. And why it was even important in the book of Leviticus, he would order the Levites after the sacrifices to pour the blood in the ground, like in the sand, and cover it with sand. And there is a reason for that. Deuteronomy 21, 1 through 9. If anyone is found slain, lying in the field, in the land which the Adon your Elohim is giving you to possess, and it is not known who killed him, then your elders and your judges shall go out and measure the distance from the slain man to the surrounding cities. And it shall be that the elders of the city nearest to the slain man will take a heifer which has not been worked and which has not pulled with a yoke. The elders of that city shall bring the heifer down to a valley with flowing water, which is neither plowed nor sown, and they shall break the heifer's neck there in the valley. Then the priests, the son of Levi, shall come near, for the Adon your Elohim has chosen them to minister to him and to bless in the name of the Most High. By their word every controversy and every assault shall be settled. And all of the elders of that city nearest to the slain man shall wash their hands over the heifer whose neck was broken in the valley. Then they shall answer and say, our hands have not shed this blood, nor have our eyes seen it. Provide atonement, O Adon, for your people Israel, whom you have redeemed. And do not lay innocent blood to the charge of your people Israel. An atonement shall be provided on their behalf for the blood. So you shall put away the guilt of the innocent blood from among you, when you do what is right in the sight of the Most High. So you, once again, reading all of this to see the importance and the connections of blood that was shed. And this was in pertaining, if anyone is found slain, lying in the field in the land, and basically no one knew who had killed him. So someone had been murdered. And look at the atonement that had to be done with a heifer, meaning with a heifer is like a cow, a bull, right? And so we see the connection with that. Then we have Hebrews 12:24. To Messiah, the mediator of the new covenant, and to the blood of sprinkling that speaks better things than that of Abel. Once again, taking it to the blood that was shed by righteous Abel. We know that blood speaks life wherever you see it in scriptures. Revelation 6, 9 through 10. When he opened the fifth seal, I saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slain for the word of the Adon and for the testimony which they held. And they cried with a loud voice, saying, how long, O Adon, holy and true, until you judge and avenge our blood and those who dwell on the earth? So there we see a direct connection with their blood, the blood of the slain that are righteous, the righteous that are slain, crying out to the Most High. So our blood speaks even when it's not in our bodies. In other words, our blood, the life is in the blood. And when it goes to the ground, the Most High receives it. Let me just check the chat. Okay, yes, that was before. So let's continue. Verse 11. So now you are cursed from the earth, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. So you're now beginning to understand, hopefully, this a little bit better. He's been cursed from the earth, from the part of the earth, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood, right? Let's connect with that, verse 11, Genesis 3:14. So the Adon said to the serpent, because you have done this, you are cursed more than all cattle and more than every beast of the field. On your belly you shall go, and you shall eat dust all the days of your life. So in a way, the same curse that the serpent has, we see his son has it as well. Deuteronomy 27:24. Cursed is the one who attacks his neighbor secretly, and all the people shall say, Amen. Deuteronomy 11:28. And the curse, if you do not obey the commandments of the Adon, but turn aside from the way which I command you today to go after other gods which you have not known. In other words, and we will be reading more about the curses as we continue this study. But yes, the curses are completely Like if you disobey, if you break the commandments, you are cursed. And that confirms that the Torah or his law has always been in place, because we see how he is cursed immediately for murdering his brother. Cursed immediately because he broke the commandments of the Most High. The commandments were not something new in the times of Moses. They always existed. And we're going to talk more about that. Deuteronomy 28:15-20. But it shall come to pass, if you do not obey the voice of the Adon your God, to observe carefully all his commandments and his statutes, which I command you today, that all these curses will come upon you and overtake you. Cursed shall be you in the city, and cursed shall you be in the country. Cursed shall be your basket and your kneading bowl. Cursed shall be the fruit of your body and the produce of your land, the increase of your cattle and the offspring of your flocks. Cursed shall you be when you come in, and cursed shall you be when you go out. The Adon will send on you cursing, confusion, and rebuke, and all that you set your hand to do, until you are destroyed and until you perish quickly, because of the wickedness of your doings, in which you have forsaken me. So once again, the curses are directly in relations to breaking his commandment and going against of what is righteous. Verse 11 says the following. Not 11. Actually, let me read Galatians before I continue. Galatians 3:10. For as many are the works of the law are under the curse, for it is written, cursed is everyone who does not continue in all things which are written in the book of the law to do them. And a lot of people take Galatians completely out of context, but this is Paul basically confirming that, yes, when you don't do what is written, you do operate under this same curse. And now, verse 14, where it says, surely you have driven me out this day from the face of the ground. This is Cain speaking, right? I shall be hidden from your face. I shall be a fugitive and a vagabond on the earth. And it will happen that anyone who finds me will kill me. Deuteronomy 31:18 says, and I will surely hide my face in that day because of all the evil which they have done. In that they have turned to other gods. So obviously this is nothing to do with Cain, but I'm adding it here because there is always shame that accompanies a person when there is evil that has been done. Whether you did the act yourself or you are ashamed for someone else, which is the case here in Deuteronomy. But we see that on verse 14, he's telling him, hide. You have driven me out this day from the face of the ground. I shall be hidden from your face. So in other words, he didn't want to be in the presence of the Most High anymore. He was ashamed. Isaiah 1:15, when you spread out your hands, I will hide my eyes from you. Even though you make many prayers, I will not hear. Your hands are full of blood. And this is a prophecy. This is the Most High speaking through Isaiah, saying like, when you spread out your hands to pray, basically, when you pray out to me, I will hide my eyes from you, meaning he's going to remove his presence. Even though you make many prayers, he will not hear because your hands are full of blood. In other words, full of blood. Yes, Cain's hands were full of blood, but this in general represents iniquity. When there is sin, iniquity, lawlessness, right? And it even confirms it in the book of Proverbs, where it says that he does not hear the prayers when you don't keep his law, his commandments. He doesn't even hear your prayers. So it is confirmed in scripture. So Genesis 9:6, where it says, whoever sheds man's blood, by man his blood shall be shed. For the image of the Adon he made man. So in other words, we were created to his image, blood included. We are not to shed the one man's blood that is righteous, that is of his seed, which is of his likeness. Notice later on, yes, he does command the righteous people, beginning even with Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, all of them, to kill those that are of the other seed, which is so important to understand that, because that blood is not of his image, of his own image. There is a clear and marked distinction there. Yes, thank you, Alina. Alina shared the precepts. He who turns his ear from the law, even his prayer is an abomination. Thank you. Yes, that is in Proverbs, right? Can you confirm where in Proverbs, just so I can share it and say, like, read it out loud? And thank you, Alina. While you look for that, let's continue reading Numbers. I'm going to read Numbers 35, verses 19, 21, and 27. The avenger of blood himself shall put, and this is a law given to the people, right? The avenger of blood himself shall put the murderer to death. When he meets him, he shall put him to death. Or in enmity he strikes him with his hand so that he dies. The one who struck him shall surely be put to death. He is a murderer. The avenger of blood shall put the murderer to death when he meets him, and the avenger of blood finds him outside the limits of the city of refuge, and the avenger of blood kills the manslayer, he shall not be guilty of blood. So this is in other words, other laws that he later on gives and details on people who murder other people. That's basically where the death penalty stems from, because you're not to remove the life from someone else. You just don't do that, unless of course it's ordered by him for other circumstances, and when that is not considered murder, that is actually killing, which is why in the 10 Commandments is not thou shalt not kill. That's a mistranslation. Is thou shalt not murder, right? Because killing itself is not the sin. There is a difference there. I think Alina shared it. Hold on. Yes, Proverbs 28:9. Thank you so much. Proverbs 28:9. So write it down, guys. That's a good one. So now verse 15, where it says, and the Adon said to him, therefore, whoever kills Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. And the Adon set a mark on Cain, lest anyone finding him should kill him. Connecting with that, then that sevenfold, you're going to see it a lot throughout scriptures. We have Leviticus 26:18. And after all of this, if you do not obey me, then I will punish you 7 times more for your sins. That's 7 times more is literally sevenfold. It's the same thing. So we see that word play of sevenfold being used throughout. Genesis 4:24 again. If Cain shall be avenged sevenfold, then Lamech 77-fold. We also see that in Psalm 79:12, and return to our neighbors sevenfold into their bosom the reproach with which they have reproached you, O Adon. Ezekiel 9:4-6, and the Adon said to him, go through the midst of the city, through the midst of Jerusalem, and put a mark on the foreheads of the men who sigh and cry over all the abominations that are done within it. To the others he said in my hearing, go after him through the city and kill. Do not, you see what I mean with kill? He's commanding them to kill. Do not let your eyes spare, nor have any pity. Utterly slay old, young men, maidens, and even little children and women. But do not come near anyone on whom is the mark, and begin at my sanctuary. So they began with the elders who were before the temple. And obviously this is prophecy in the book of Ezekiel, and it has to do with they were basically mixing with other gods and the worship of other gods in the holy temple. And we know the other gods are literally fallen angels. And so this is why he is saying, put a mark on the foreheads of the men who sigh and cry over all the abominations that are done within it. This is a good mark. This is to mark the people from being killed from this angel of death that is going to come and avenge judgment, right? So we see in the case of Cain, he's put also a mark. It's set on him. It says that no one should kill him. So a mark is always to prevent from killing. We also see that in the book of Revelation, by the way, it connects with Ezekiel 9, when Messiah sends the angels for that final trumpet, he is first going to mark his people. He's going to see who has the mark. Not the 666, but his mark, right? And we know that a mark is in Deuteronomy found to be those who keep his commandments. He says his word is inscribed as a mark in between the frontlets of their eyes and on their hand. And we are marked, spiritually marked. It's a spiritual mark. Yes, Yasmin. The 144,000 sealed saints. Absolutely. Yes. Thank you. Alina also shared. Wait, let me go back because I just noticed Yasmin had also said, reminds me how murder even shows you grew to hate your neighbor opposite of love. Yes, because that's the whole point of murdering. You kill for no reason, like exactly what Cain did with Abel. And Alina shared, yes, goes against the second greatest commandment, ye shall love your neighbor as yourself. Absolutely. All right, so let's continue to wrap up this chapter. Verse 7, well, actually verse 16. Then Cain went out from the presence of the Adon and dwelt in the land of Nod on the east of Eden. So we see that he immediately is out of his presence. And that connection, we're going to see it with everyone who is in sin, or like in the story of 2 Kings 13:23, but the Adon was gracious to them, had compassion on them, and regarded them because of his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and would not yet destroy them or cast them from his presence. Why? Because not only was he gracious to them, but they were under the covenant, right, of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. 2 Kings 24:20, for because of the anger of the Adon, this happened in Jerusalem and Judea, that he finally cast them out from his presence. Then Zedekiah rebelled against the king of Babylon. All right, Jeremiah 23:39, therefore, behold, I, even I, will utterly forget you and forsake you, and the city that I gave you and your fathers, and I will cast you out of my presence. Which is exactly, by the way, what took place with Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, right? Jeremiah 52:3, for because of the anger of the Adon, this happened in Jerusalem and Judah, till he finally cast them out from his. Oh, I just read that, sorry. It was a different one. It kind of reads the same thing, yeah. Finally cast him out of his presence. All right. Jonah 1:3, but Jonah arose to flee to Tarshish from the presence of the Adon. And here he goes away from the presence because he actually did not want to go do the will of the Most High, what he was commanded to do, which was to preach the repentance message to the people of Nineveh, right? So he went down to Joppa and found a ship going to Tarshish. So he paid the fare and went into it to go with them to Tarshish from the presence of the Adon. So there he was running away from his presence because he actually wanted to disobey his order, right? Verse 17, Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Enoch. And by the way, guys, this is not at all the same Enoch of the scriptures, or the same meaning Enoch, the one that we read from, right? This is not the same Enoch that walked with the Most High. There is two Enochs. There's one from the line of Cain, and there's an Enoch from the line of Seth. The Enoch from the line of Seth is the righteous seed and is the righteous one that walked with the Most High. And we're going to talk also about that. But yes, his wife conceived Enoch, and he built a city and called the name of the city after the name of his son, Enoch. And connecting with verse 17, we have Psalms 49:11. Their inner thought is that their houses will last forever, their dwelling places to all generations. They call their lands after their own names. That's just to confirm why the land of Enoch was named after his son Enoch, because that's something that they would do in those days. Verse 19. Then Lamech took for himself two wives. The name of one was Ada, and the name of the second was Zillah. Genesis 2:24. Therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. So we see that this man became one flesh with two different women. So this has been happening from the beginning, right? When this happened for the first time with the line of Cain. We also see, connecting with that, Genesis 16:3, that Abraham ends up doing the same thing from the righteous seed. Then Sarai, Abraham's wife, took Hagar, her maid, the Egyptian, and gave her to her husband Abram to be his wife. And Abram had dwelt 10 years in the land of Canaan. So the distinction with Abram is that it was actually Sarai who did that. And we know the story, and we'll read it later. It has to do with her lack of faith, right? 1 Timothy 3:2. We see later on in the New Testament how it is imperative for a man only to have one wife. It says, a bishop then must be blameless, the husband of one wife, temperate, sober-minded, of good behavior, hospitable, able to teach. And I add this here because this points the original intent. Just as Messiah is the bridegroom and he has only one bride, is the same way that a husband is to have one bride. And that was the original intent from the beginning. Okay, so we have for verse 24 where it says, if Cain shall be avenged sevenfold, then Lamech shall be avenged, then Lamech 77-fold. Once again, we see a comparison of this with what we just read with Cain and the vengeance, right, being taken sevenfold. But we see Messiah using the same wordplay in Matthew 18:21, where it says, then Peter came to him and said, Adon, how often shall my brother sin against me, and I forgive him? Up to 7 times. And we know that Messiah answers him up to 70 times 7, right? So there is a reason why they always use that. It is kind of like a metaphor, but it's been used from the very beginning. And I just wanted to point out that there is a deeper meaning with that maybe we don't quite understand, but it has to do with the number 7, which equals completion. And it goes around there. Verse 25. And Adam knew his wife again, and she bore a son and named him Seth. For the Most High has appointed another seed for me instead of Abel, whom Cain killed. Genesis 5:3. And Adam lived 130 years and begot a son in his own likeness, after his image, and named him Seth. So you see, that confirms what I was saying later. We're going to read it now in chapter 5. But I wanted to point it out because his son was of the righteous seed, which is why he replaces Abel. Adam, up to that point, only had Abel and then Seth, right? Cain was not of his seed. And lastly, from chapter 4, we have verse 26. And as for Seth, to him also a son was born, and he named him Enoch. Then men began to call on the name of the Adon. So this is the part when the righteous seed are being born from the line of Seth, is when they begin to cry out to the Most High and to worship him and basically walking with him. We know that from this line comes the other Enoch as well. Genesis 5:6, Seth lived 105 years and begot Enoch. Genesis 12:8, and he moved from there to the mountain east of Bethel, and he pitched his tent with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. There he built an altar to the Adon and called on the name of the Adon. All these precepts now to confirm how often these righteous men and women were calling on the name. This was Abraham, for example. Later on, Jacob, Genesis 26:25. So he built an altar there and called on the name of the Adon, and he pitched his tent there, and there Isaac's servant dug a well. 1 Kings 18:24. Then you call on the name of your gods, and I will call on the name of the Adon. And the God who answers by fire, he is God. So all the people answered and said, it is well spoken. This is Elijah, right? Elijah, not Elisha. Calling on the name of the Adon. Psalms 116:17. I will offer you the sacrifice of thanksgiving, and I will call upon the name of the Most High. That is David. Joel 2:32. And it shall come to pass, this is a latter day prophecy, that whoever calls on the name of the Adon shall be saved. For in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem there shall be deliverance, as the Adon has said, among the remnant whom the Adon calls. We also have Zephaniah 3:9. For then I will restore to the peoples a pure language, that they all may call on the name of the Adon to serve him in one accord. 1 Corinthians 1:2. To the church of God which is at Corinth, to those who are sanctified in Yahshua HaMashiach, called to be saints, with all who in every place call on the name of Yahshua HaMashiach, our Adon, both theirs and ours. So whoever calls on the name of the Adon from beginning to end, and it began with these righteous seed right here in chapter 4 of Genesis. We have now chapter 5, and I'm going to read it really, really quickly. It's just a lot of names, so we're going to run through it, okay? This is the book of the genealogy of Adam. Highlight that in your books, the genealogy of Adam. And we're going to see, you guys are going to be able to see what I'm talking about here with Cain, okay? Once again, the genealogy of Adam. In the day that the Most High created man, he made him in the likeness of the Adon of our Mashiach, right? He created them male and female and blessed them and called them mankind in the day they were created. Check this out. And Adam lived 130 years and begot a son in his own likeness, what we just read, after his image, and named him. Oh, where is Cain, guys? Where is Cain? Where did Cain go? He named him Seth. Remember, Seth replaced Abel. So it goes straight into Seth. After he begot Seth, the days of Adam were 800 years and he had sons and daughters. So all the days that Adam lived were 930 years and he died. Seth lived 105 years and begot Enoch. After Enoch, Seth lived 807 years and had sons and daughters. So all the days of Seth were 912 years and he died. Enoch lived 90 years and begot Canaan. Remember the precious land of Canaan? That's where it comes from. And after he begot Canaan, Enoch lived 815 years and had sons and daughters. So all the days of Enoch were 905 years and he died. Canaan lived 70 years and begot Mahalalel. And he begot Mahalalel. After he begot Mahalalel, Canaan lived 840 years and had sons and daughters. So all the days of Canaan were 910 years and he died. Mahalalel lived 65 years and begot Jared. After he begot Jared, Mahalalel lived 830 years and had sons and daughters. So all the days of Mahalalel were 895 years and he died. Jared lived 162 years and begot Enoch. So this is the righteous Enoch. You see, guys, Jared is the father from the line of Seth. After he begot Enoch, Jared lived 100 years and had sons, and 800 years and had sons and daughters. So all the days of Jared were 962 years and he died. Enoch lived 65 years and begot Methuselah. After he begot Methuselah, check this out. After he begot Methuselah, Enoch walked with the Most High, with the Adon, 300 years and had sons and daughters. In other words, he walked 300 whole years hand in hand with the Adon, right? This is this Enoch right here, righteous Enoch from the righteous line of Adam from Seth, right? So all the days of Enoch were 365 years. And Enoch walked with the Adon and he was not, for God took him. We're going to talk about this. Methuselah lived 187 years and begot Lamech. And after he begot Lamech, Methuselah lived 782 years and had sons and daughters. So all the days of Methuselah were 969 years and he died. Lamech lived 182 years and had a son. And he called his name Noah. And this is where Noah comes from. Lamech from Methuselah from Enoch. All this generation, right? This one will comfort us concerning our work and the toil of our hands because of the ground which the Adon has cursed. We're going to talk a lot more about Noah when we get to chapter 6. After he begot Noah, Lamech lived 595 years and had sons and daughters. So all the days of Lamech were 777 years and he died. And Noah was 500 years old and Noah begat Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And again, we're going to get more into the account of Noah, our next study next week, but I did want to go over the entire generation, the genealogy, just to confirm what I've been saying from the beginning of this study. So now that I said all that and read all that, we can go back to our slides. So we have that Cain is absent from this genealogy, right? We have number 1, Adam, number 2, Seth, number 3, Enoch, number 4, Canaan, which is Canaan, number 5, Mahalalel, number 6, Jared, and number 7, Enoch. If Cain were Adam's biological seed, Enoch would be 8th and not 7th. And scripture confirms this. I'm going to show you. Again, in Jude chapter 1, verse 14, it says, Enoch, the 7th from Adam. In Luke 3:37 through 38, it says, the son of Methuselah, the son of Enoch, the son of Jared, the son of Mahalalel, the son of Canaan, the son of Enoch, the son of Seth, the son of Adam, the son of God. This is Messiah's genealogy. Do you see what I see here? Where in the flippity-dippity is Cain? nowhere to be found, right? Cain is deliberately excluded. Abel is excluded because he left no seed. Obviously, right? He was murdered by his brother. But Cain is excluded because he is not of Adam's seed. Just wanted to highlight that and point that out, confirming the understanding that we've been sharing from chapters 1 through 3. I believe is confirmed right here in chapters 4 through 5, just reading the genealogy alone. And Alina is saying, I was a little confused when I read that at first, but when you see the descendants, it makes sense. Yes. Now you see what I'm seeing, right? Especially when it says Adam's genealogy and there's no Cain. So what is Cain's true origin then? Right? It's the same metaphor from the beginning. I've always said it. 1 John 3:12. Not as Cain, who was of that wicked one. And what does also Messiah call these generations? In Matthew 23:33, when he's addressing the Judaizers, the Pharisees of his days, he calls them you serpents. But not only does he call them serpents, you generation of vipers. Ooh, could it be perhaps that there was a whole seed that came from the serpent's line? And that's why Messiah is saying generation of vipers? Question marks, right? So this is seed language. To my understanding, this sounds like seed language, right? And this is the unfolding of Genesis 3:15, what we were talking about last week. So now we're going to talk about strange flesh and the rebellion. Strange flesh in scriptures, we're going to find in Jude, it speaks about strange flesh. The rebellion is literally when the angels rebelled against the Most High and they were thrown out, and they are considered the fallen angels, but they are angels nonetheless. However, they are considered strange flesh, especially when they're mixing with mankind. I mean, not the fallen angels are strange flesh. When the fallen angels are mixing with mankind, meaning with the women, are procreating their own seed, which is not of the image of Messiah, is not created to his own image. Therefore, it is strange flesh. That's what I was trying to say. Sorry, I got my words all mixed up. So we have Jude 6:6-7 that connects this. Angels leaving their proper domain. We have the sexual transgression, which is spoken of also in Genesis 6, and the judgment. Strange flesh represents boundary violation. The serpent did it with Eve, right? The fallen angels did it with the women. The sons of Cain continue to do the same. We have the Nephilim as a result, and the Canaanites who took on the land of Canaan. And that's why when the land of Canaan is given to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and later on we know the Israelites went back to Egypt. Long story short, then they have to go and repossess the land. It was taken by these giants, by the Nephilim. That's why who they were fighting against. So there is different expressions, but it is the same exact rebellion. The rebellion on earth and then in heaven. In earth, it started on earth as it is, or as it was in heaven. Same idea, same story. So Enoch echoes Genesis 4, and we're going to read that. Enoch chapter 7-9, that's actually what I was reading earlier, guys. And I don't know why I had it connecting with the verse that I did, but this is what I was trying to say. Enoch chapter 7-9 echoes Genesis 4, where the innocent blood cries out, the earth bears witness, the violence reaches heaven. Abel's blood cries from the ground, the victims of the Nephilim cry from the earth, and the earth itself testifies. Because we see that the Nephilim cry out in the book of Enoch as well. Their blood is crying out because they are basically killing each other. It's crazy how the story continued to repeating itself. So now I'm going to go into a separate part of this study. Now that you guys understand, hopefully, the distinction between the two seeds, between Adam's seed and Yes, Adam's seed and obviously the serpent seed. Now we're going to go into pointing out how the Torah or his precious law was always active from Eden from the beginning. So where it says in Deuteronomy 27:24, cursed is the one who secretly kills his neighbor, or in other words, murders his neighbor, right? We see that Cain did exactly that, right? So the law was not invented later. Cain was cursed because he broke the law. He broke the Torah, right? The law, in other words, was revealed to Moses later. That's why I have this image over here. It was revealed later and written in tablets of stone. However, it was always from the beginning. The divine statutes already existed and preserved in the heavenly tablets, and that is found actually in the book of righteous Enoch. And we confirm that even through later in Genesis, we're going to see how Abraham, it literally says that he was righteous because he kept all the law. And what law? What law was he keeping, right? If not the ones that were written in the heavenly tablets. Do remember, guys, that in the times of Lamech, who was it that was born? Enoch. In the times of Enoch, when he was born from Seth, during those days and moving forth, they began to call out on the name of the Adon. So what happens when you call him? It says in Jeremiah, call and I shall answer, and I will reveal to you the things that are, like secret. And so basically, if these righteous men and women were calling out to him, what do you think he was doing if not revealing his perfect instructions and commandments to them from the beginning? And not only that, we see it on the account of Enoch, how he would meet with the Most High. Hello, the men walked with him for 300 and what? Like 300, over 300 years? Of course he knew all these details. The Most High was like, they were like sidekicks. But anyways, Genesis 4 introduces sevenfold vengeance. I'm going to go back to that idea of sevenfold that I was trying to convey earlier. So the judicial language appears again in Leviticus 26, like we read, in Psalms, in Proverbs, and even in the book of Sirach. Sevenfold represents complete divine accounting, not emotional retaliation. And that's what I was trying to tell you guys with the number 7, that 7 means in scripture like completion, and I believe that's what sevenfold represents, and that's why it's widely used throughout scriptures from beginning to end, even including Messiah, like I read an example. I also want to talk about how Messiah reverses the pattern. So Matthew 18:21 through 22, when Lamech says 77-fold vengeance, as we found in Genesis 4, in Matthew 18, we see Yahshua says 77-fold forgiveness, right? Forgive up to 70 times 7. So same number and opposite spirit. So in other words, Messiah does not erase Genesis, he redeems it. Woo! That's what I see from it. I don't know if you guys see it. I'm going to say that again in case y'all missed it. Messiah does not erase Genesis, he redeems it. Because remember, they were operating under the curse. Yes, amen. Yasmin is saying, blessed are your eyes for they see, and blessed are your ears for they hear. Amen. And then she shared Romans 12:19. Beloved, do not avenge yourselves, but rather give place to wrath. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Most High. Amen. Thank you for sharing, Yazzie. All right, let's continue. So, told you I was gonna go back to Enoch walked with the Most High, because we gotta take our time with this. Like, let's just talk about this. Let's analyze this. And guys, let's give it a high five to Pinterest for all the freaking cool images that I've been getting. I love this one because that's literally how I envision Enoch being dark skinned, and I don't know here, but it kind of shows well, he is dark there. Yes, he's definitely dark there. I just cropped his face out because we don't know what he looks like. I didn't want to put that impression upon anyone. But anyway, Enoch walked with the Most High, meaning with the Adon. He walked with Messiah the same way Messiah walked in the cool of the day with Adam. He was walking with righteous Enoch. It says that in 5:24. Once again, and Enoch walked with the Most High, and he was not, for the Most High took him. The Hebrew halak implies habitual, relational obedience. Sirach suggests Enoch repented midlife, and then favor is measured by alignment, not longevity. And actually, you see that not only Sirach suggests that, but in Genesis, when you read it, it says that he first had his first son, which I think was Lamech, if I'm not mistaken. It says he was 65, and then after that is when it says, and then he walked 300 years with the Adon. So again, favor is measured by alignment, not by longevity. That's why I said that. So he was taken, he was not dead, meaning he was not killed. He was taken in flesh and body. Jasher, the account on Jasher confirms this. The book of Enoch confirms this. The Targum, Pseudo Jonathan expands Enoch's story, identifying him with the Metatron, and we're going to read it shortly. Psalm 73 uses the same language of being taken, and this is not disappearance, this is transformation. So in other words, it's the same way that when Messiah comes back, how our bodies will be glorified, like those of us, and I include myself by faith, right? Those of us that don't taste death, physical death, our bodies will be glorified. And that's basically what happened to Enoch. That's what happened with Elijah. I kind of want to believe that's kind of sort of what happened with Moses, though we're not sure what happened with Moses, but y'all get the point. Our bodies will be glorified and taken to heaven, or not heaven, to the New Jerusalem, and the New Jerusalem comes down here to earth, but you guys get what I'm saying. Our bodies are glorified, and that's basically what took place with Enoch. And like I've always said, before I read this slide, what I've always said about Enoch is that how do people still question the whole idea with Enoch writing his own book? Like, it's the only man that you see that it's literally expressed how long he walked with the Most High. Like, how is it that he walked for so many years here on earth, and yet there's nothing written on him? And then you see Jude speaking of Enoch as a prophet and saying, as prophesied by Enoch, and quoting literally directly from the book of Enoch, verbatim, line by line, as Messiah would quote from Isaiah, for example. And nobody's questioning, like, where's this book? I mean, I'm just saying, just want to always throw that in there. But anyways, let's continue with my final reflection that I want to share with you guys here. Genesis 4-5 reveals two seeds, meaning one righteous and one of the serpent, which is not righteous, right? It's lawless, it's corrupt. There are two lineages. There are two destinies, completely different destinies, right? One line walks with the Most High, the other resists the Most High. The question is not which lineage you know about. The question is which one you are walking in. Before I end this, I do want to apologize because I do want to connect a couple more verses with chapter 5 to end this on the topic of Enoch. Verse 18, where it says Jared lived 162 years and begot Enoch. This Enoch here, Jude 1:14-15. Now Enoch, the seventh from Adam, right? The seventh, what I confirmed, what I spoke about earlier, prophesied about these men also, saying, this is the one that he quotes from the book of Enoch, by the way. Behold, the Adon comes with 10,000 of his saints to execute judgment on all, to convict all who are ungodly, among them of all their ungodly deeds which they have committed in an ungodly way, and of all the harsh things which ungodly sinners have spoken against him. Verse 22, where it says, after he begot Methuselah, Enoch walked with the Most High 300 years and had sons and daughters. So yes, it was 300. I wanted to confirm that because I wasn't sure. 300 years we have on that, confirming Sirach chapter 44, verse 16. Enoch pleased the Adon and was taken up, an example of repentance to all generations. We also see for verse 24 where it says, and Enoch walked with the Most High, and he was not, for the Adon took him. We have confirming with that wisdom of Solomon, chapter 4, verse 10. There was one who pleased the Most High and was loved by him, and while living among sinners was taken up. This is again speaking of Enoch. We also have Enoch, chapter 12, not 1. Let me look for it here. Enoch chapter 12, verses 1-2. Before all these things, Enoch was concealed, nor did any one of the sons of men know where he was concealed, where he had been, and what had happened. He was wholly engaged with the holy ones, and with the watchers in his days. So these are the days that he would like go and disappear for months, weeks, years at a time, and he would speak even with the watchers. The watchers would even go and beg him to go up to the Most High and to like ask for forgiveness on their behalf, type of thing. And I also did want to read from the Targum's translation, chapter 5 of Genesis, for verse 24. That same verse, what we just read, that Enoch walked with the Most High and then he took him. I want to read it from the Targum's translation so you see how it renders, because it adds details. Chapter 5, verse 24 is down here. No, this is chapter 4. Yeah. Chapter 5. Okay, chapter 5, verse 24. Way too fast. Okay. Hanok hears Enoch, by the way. And Enoch served in the truth before the Adon. And behold, he was not with the sojourners of the earth, for he was withdrawn, and he ascended to the firmament. Check this out. By the word before the Most High. And his name was called Metatron, the great Saphra. That's what I had added in my little Canva print slide there. That he was called a Metatron. Obviously, he was surely one of the top righteous men, right? So he had a little cool title there. I wanted to add that for understanding. Yasmin is sharing. Hold on. Alina said, the fact that he lived 365 years, he has a whole book talking about the luminaries, etc. Yes, girl, yes, absolutely. And it's so crazy because the same people that criticize his book are the ones that are stuck in a very pagan calendar too, not understanding that. Whatever, I'm not gonna get into that, but Yasmin shared that part, and literally you see references in the canon, yes, of the Book of Enoch. When people try to deny the Book of Enoch, I think of Hosea 4:6. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Because thou hast rejected knowledge, I will also reject thee, that thou shalt be no priest to me. Seeing that thou hast forgotten the law of thy God, I will also forget thy children. I read that. I used to be like this man. Reminds me of the righteousness of Moses. Yes, absolutely. And Jessica's saying she pictures Enoch ascending like Messiah did. Yes. She also shared, I feel like rejecting Enoch, you reject a lot of truth and you keep your eyes closed. The truth like pieces of a puzzle. And speaking of that, it's so crazy because I actually spoke this Sunday on a topic that is called the truth is not for everyone. It's only for those that want to strive for righteousness, basically. And I'm going to tell you how the Book of Enoch begins. And this is how you know the truth ain't for everyone. Look how the Book of Enoch begins. Chapter 1, the word of the blessing of Enoch, how he blessed the elect and the righteous who were to exist in the time of trouble, rejecting all the wicked and ungodly. Enoch, a righteous man who was with the Most High, answered and spoke with his eyes, while his eyes were open and while he saw a holy vision of the heavens. This the angels showed me. So right there you see that the book was written for his elect. This is a different translation, by the way, but I feel like my translation renders it more specifically that the word that was written by Enoch was written for the elect that exists, like for the elect and the righteous. It does say it actually, yes. So right there, you see that book is not for everyone. Everyone who rejects the truth, everyone who's not ready to hear, like literally Shema, which means to hear and obey. Because it's not about just hearing and not doing, it's about hearing and actually doing. So yes, that's why a lot of people will reject Enoch. Lastly, I did want to read from the account of Jasher, because I did point out in the beginning how there's a part here in chapter 4 of Genesis that kind of jumps from genealogy to like, oh, and then this guy over here, Lamech, marries and has 2 wives. And I wanted to give a little bit deeper understanding of what took place here. And I do exhort you guys, read the Book of Jasher. While you're reading Genesis, take your time and read the Book of Jasher, because it's going to add so much more understanding, so much more details that is missing in our canon in Genesis. But yes, I'm going to read, let me see if I start from before, actually. No, let me just read this part. So this is chapter 2 of Jasher. And I'm going to read from verses 26 and down. And Lamech was old and advanced in years, and his eyes were dim that he could not see. And Tubal-Cain, his son, was leading him. And it was one day that Lamech went into the field, and Tubal-Cain, his son, was with him. And whilst they were walking in the field, Cain, the son of Adam, advanced towards them. For Lamech was very old and could not see much, and Tubal-Cain, his son, was very young. And Tubal-Cain told his father to draw his bow, and with the arrows he smote Cain. You see that? Tubal-Cain smote Cain, which was like the grandfather type of thing, right? Who was yet far off, and he slew him, for he appeared to them to be an animal. So he didn't murder his grandfather. It was kind of like a mistake, like an accidental death, right? Because, and it's interesting too, the fact that Cain appeared to them to be an animal. And he was from the serpent seed. I'm just saying that's very interesting to me. But anyway, verse 28. And the arrows entered Cain's body, although he was distant from them, and he fell to the ground and died. And the Adon requited Cain's evil according to his wickedness, which he had done to his brother Abel, according to the word of the Adon, which he had spoken. And here confirms that it's always the word, right? It's not just the Lord, it's the word, it's Messiah. The Adon is from the beginning. And it came to pass when Cain had died that Lamech and Tubal went to see the animal which they had slain. And they saw, and behold, Cain, their grandfather, was fallen dead upon the earth. And Lamech was very much grieved at having done this. And in clapping his hands together, he struck his son and caused his death. So he kills Tubal-Cain. And the wives of Lamech heard what Lamech had done, and they sought to kill him. You see how many details is missing there in that part in Genesis? And the wives of Lamech hated him from that day because he slew Cain and Tubal-Cain. And the wives of Lamech separated from him and would not hearken to him in those days. And Lamech came to his wife, and he pressed them to listen to him about this matter. And he said to his wives, Adah and Zillah, hear my voice, O wives of Lamech, attend to my words. For now you have imagined and said that I slew a man with my wounds, and a child with my stripes, for their having done no violence. Excuse me. But surely know that I am old and gray-headed, and that my eyes are heavy through age, and I did this thing unknowingly. And the wives of Lamech listened to him in this matter, and they returned to him with the advice of their father Adam. But they bore no children to him from that time, knowing that God's anger was increasing in those days against the Son of Man, to destroy them with the waters of the flood for their evil doings. And Mahalalel, the son of Canaan, lived 65 years, and he begat Jared. And Jared lived 62 years and begat Enoch. So you see here what I was talking about, how it jumps from Zillah having this guy here, Tubal-Cain, which he was a craftsman in the bronze of iron, which makes sense because he's the one that accidentally kills his grandfather Cain. And then it says, then Lamech said this to his wives. You see how when you read it like that, it makes like no sense. Like, Adah and Zillah, hear my voice, wives of Lamech, listen to my speech. For I have killed a man for wounding me, even a young man for hurting me. If Cain shall be avenged sevenfold, and then Lamech 77-fold. You guys see now the full picture with the Book of Jasher. What he was talking about was the fact that he himself killed Cain and his son Tubal-Cain. So just wanted to add that for deeper understanding. I hope you guys were able to see the full picture. Jessica is like, we must be in the spirit because of the Shema thing. I know I told you when you put that on Instagram, I'm like, girl, you weren't even there connected, and that's what was spoken. She's always flowing in the spirit with me, though. It's crazy. We have some cool, crazy connection like that. But anyway, back to the final reflection. The two seeds, the two lineages, the two different destinies. We already see how it was going for Cain's bloodline from the very beginning, and we see how beautiful Seth's bloodline continues to go, from which then comes Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and the rest of our forefathers. And we see that that is literally from where the set apart people are drawn out from the righteous seed, meaning Israel. So understanding what truly took place in Eden brings clarity to the entire redemption plan. Like I said, from Adam to Abraham, from Isaac to Jacob, from Israel to Messiah, the story has never changed. The Most High has always been dealing with seed, which is why we are to bear the fruits of his spirit, right? It's all about a seed and his seed, right? He is the vine and we are the branches, and we're supposed to be grafted in into the tree of life. And this is why, once again, he chooses Israel as his set apart seed from among the nations. This is why scripture consistently warns against idol worship, because idol worship is worshiping other gods, other fallen angels, which is at its root the worship of fallen angels rather than the creator. This is why we must be born again of his spirit and not merely of the flesh. The flesh reproduces flesh, but the spirit restores what was lost. This is why obedience matters. His laws and instructions are not bondage. They are guardrails back to life, back to the tree of life, right? From Genesis to Revelation, the Bible returns to the same original metaphor. It is one garden. It is two different trees leading to two separate seeds. Messiah is the first fruit, the promised seed, right? And the fulfillment of the redemption plan, the way back to the tree of life. This is why each appointed feast is connected to sowing and harvesting, and they are prophetic rehearsals pointing us back to Eden, back to alignment, and back to communion with the Most High, meaning back to the presence. How we were reading, when people were in sin, they would withdraw from the presence of the Most High, right? But redemption is not a new idea. It is a restoration of the original design that began once again in the Garden of Eden. So I really hope and I pray that this study brought not only deeper understanding, but a passion to continue studying to show yourself approved by studying his perfect word and understanding that he is perfect from the beginning. His redemptive plan is perfect, and that the reason why he may have appeared as this mean Elohim or God at the beginning, now I pray that you don't see it that way anymore, that you understand that it is, and it was, and it continues to be, and it always has been about the redemption of his seed, of his righteous seed, of his bloodline. Remember, the blood, the life is in the blood, which is why he had to shed his own blood to redeem us back. It is so beautiful, guys. Everything connects back to Eden and back to the tree of life. And that's what the entire word is about. So thank you for breaking bread with us. I pray that you're not too confused and that you continue connecting with us every week and learning more, just so we can fall more in love with our Creator, the one that is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Much shalom to all of you. See you guys next week.